Good morning. Good morning. I hope everybody's doing well out there. Um, Today we're going to do a little bit of the posing and some work on my Samus that I've been working on in the past several weeks. We're going to get this into Photoshop and do that kind of the process you may have seen before with Ape Sapien and on Gray Fox. So we're going to do both of that today. I hope you guys are doing good. Like I said, so yeah, today we're going to get started. In case you've never been to a Gnomon Art Jam, welcome. The basic synopsis of what we're going to do today is we're going to hang out for 3 hours. I'm going to work on some art. I'm going to answer some questions if you got them. But otherwise, I'm just going to show you a little bit of my process. And if you've seen any of the art jams before, if you're interested, you'll kind of see that it ranges from sculpting, modeling, Photoshop, just general tips and tricks about kinds of things. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. We are watching the chat. I'm watching the chat. So if you have questions, like I said, and that can be about Gnomon, that can be about me, it can be about entertainment, it can be about all kinds of things. So feel free to ask. And we're here. We also have Adam Hartel, one of our recruiters, is here in the chat, so he can hook you up with our admissions team, anything about any of our information, Gnomon's offerings and stuff like that. He can set you up there. So we're here to help. Jealous Chataraj, hello. Hope you're doing well. He said, please reply. So there you go. Hope you're doing well. The previous series that I've been doing, this is the Fan Art 6 series. So you guys have, if you've seen any of the art jams before, you've probably seen me do a couple of these before, but what we've been working on has been, trying to make sure I have them, the most recent ones. I'll just pull up in Photoshop, make sure you guys can see that. But this is some of the previous ones we've been working on. I kind of threw IG88 in there because I'm needing to get on with this project, and this was one that I had kind of been wanting to work on for a while anyways. So Gray Fox, Ape Sapien, IG88, and we're also working on a Bosk, and we are working on a Samus at the same time, and then we'll have that mystery character being the last one. You can actually, I'm using the real movie font. It is a movie. I guess that's a tip. So if you can decipher what it is, you get bonus points for that. But I can't seem to find my previous Bosk one. Ray, what's up, Ray? Hope you're doing well, man. Ray's here on Twitch. Miranda as well. Hello. Got a couple people joining. Hope everything's going good out there. For some reason, my Bosk, maybe it was a couple weeks ago. Twitch stuff. Sorry, I'm going through folders on my other side, so it's super exciting for you guys, I'm sure. But let's see. Yeah, this is kind of where we got to a couple weeks ago with Bosk. So there's obviously some things we need to fix here. It's an issue with, yeah, you can see that that's filled with the material. Yeah, so we'll get that back to something that's more standard. So eventually we'll be going to this, doing a Bosk illustration. Today we're going to attempt to wrap up a Samus illustration today. So that's kind of what we're going for. And we will be using some Zbrush today, and we'll be using some Photoshop today. So let's get started. I'm going to jump into just starting to do some posing. We had done some posing previously, very, very quickly in previous streams. What I'm going to do is I'm basically going to use T-Pose Master, which is a plugin, which is kind of up here, hidden underneath the little Gnomon banner. But if you hit it, you'll kind of scroll down and you'll see this Transpose Master button. What that's going to do is it's going to take all of the subtools and it's going to shove them into a single subtool. And then we're going to go from there. Now, one thing that I have been doing, as you'll notice in the Photoshop thing here, is that we're actually doing a very thin aspect ratio. And so that's something I kind of want to keep in mind here. I'm going to move Bosk over here, and I'm going to move Samus over here. just so that we're kind of doing it in the order we're doing. If you guys were here last week, you saw me doing some hard surface modeling on a Jaeger, or something that resembles a Jaeger from Pacific Rim. That's a project I want to move on to at some point to get into a much larger project, and so that's part of why we're going to try to burn through these as quickly as possible. And that will have fun. We can have fun doing a big project where we can like go through multiple phases, a bunch more programs. Right now, we've just been doing design and illustration through and sculpting. So I think getting into something that's a bigger project, maybe using some other softwares like exploring things in Quixel, exploring things in Substance, exploring doing more modeling and UVing and stuff like that in Maya will be really good. Getting into, I've been really interested in personally myself learning Unreal, so showing that off once we get into that. So there's a lot of things I think we can do in a bigger project that will be kind of fun to follow along with. So, but for now, we're going to wrap these up. All right, we're jumping into actual work today. So I'm going to be posing this Samus, and again, like I said, this is a tight aspect ratio, so we're going to have to kind of work in like a sort of a very specific zone for that. So I'm going to hit T-pose mesh. You're just going to see it kind of make some like adjustments to the screen, and there we go. Now this is set up. So I'm going to turn on a different matte cap, maybe just to kind of color. There we go. You're not that late. You're 8 minutes late. That's not bad at all. Welcome. Welcome to the stream today. We're going to be posing Samus. We're going to be rendering out some passes here in ZBrush. We're going to be kicking those over to Photoshop, and we'll be starting our illustration. So my personal goal for this is to be done with posing in about 30 minutes, be done with all my rendering in an hour, and have a decent starting point on the paint over process by the end of the stream. All right, so as you can see, this is still all a bunch of different poly groups, which is great. That's what we want. The challenge with that is it's going to make it a little harder to actually pose the character. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to look at the neck first, and I'm just going to mask off the bottom, invert that mask. Make sure my symmetry is on, which it is. Now that the mask is the only thing that's shown, I'm going to do this. Invert it. We got a question from YouTube asking, does Gnomon provide scholarships to new students? We have very limited scholarships. We don't have full ride programs or something like that, if that's what you're looking for. The best way to learn about those is definitely to reach out to our admissions team. As with all of Gnomon programs, even individual classes, we have a very different and unique way of doing our admissions, which is where we work with people who are interested in going to school. And oh, that's symmetry's on. That's terrifying. Oh, and speaking to them there. We'll just do a little turn. I've also, again, looking at this, we've got one person on the side here, right? Eventually, I might move these around so that they fit better as like a single crop of images. But I think I want at least one character looking, not trying to dab, but this way on your screen. So I kind of want one character looking that way. Right now, they're all kind of looking this way. So I think at least for this character, I'm going to have her looking this way. All right. Got some questions already popping up. It's really difficult to pronounce all these names, by the way, so I'm going to attempt to do some of that. But Alok Shinde, I think from Twitch, is asking, I'm going to get into VFX, so where should I start from? That's a good question. I guess I would ask you if you have a specific area of interest in VFX, or if you're just kind of interested in at the beginnings of art in VFX. Either way, learning a base 3D package is always good, and that's probably something I would recommend. Even just a simple head pose like this, I've worked pretty hard to have this character have a bit of gesture in the body. Even a really simple head pose like this for me is kind of working, so I might just start with that. A little head tilt down so we get some more gesture there. We can do something simple and not have to do a big thing. That's always nice. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to open up the aspect ratio that I'm going to be rendering in. So I'm going to go to my document and I'm going to turn off Pro. That constrains proportions. I turn my width. I'm doing a 3:1 ratio. So I'm going to do a smaller version here. Width 500, height 1500. Hit resize. You sure you want to do that? I say yes. And now I have my thing. You'll see that the perspective that it's using is pretty extreme, but that's okay. Like, oh, this is actually what I said I was not going to do, right? They're all looking that way. I did exactly the opposite of what I said I was going to do. This is kind of nice because then we can get that gun arm in the back. You know, maybe I'll zoom out just a little bit so you can see the full scope of it. And I'll change the background here so that we can, doesn't need to be a, no, that's not what the one I wanted. I want the document. What is that one called? Not the background of that. Oh, well, we'll just make this a color for now. Orange is going to be fine, or this like a light gray. So this is what our actual render is going to look like. Let's see. So somebody from YouTube is asking, how's it to have a career with 70% ZBrush and the rest paint over in character design? I think that there's a lot of people who are working in that workflow, which is the workflow that more or less that I use. Do I want this to be closer or further? I kind of want further. See, the more that I keep doing this, the more she keeps looking the opposite direction. Said I would have them look inwards. No matter what I'm doing, I keep making her look to the left. So I need to maybe try something like this. Or just do the opposite of what I was doing. So if I was going this way, yeah, I think something like this is going to be nice. It's definitely possible to have a career with 70% ZBrush. There's a lot of 3D design in the industry now. It's obviously something that's relatively new, but it is pretty common, I would say, to have character designers working in ZBrush, working in Maya, working in 3D in general. Good question, though. But it is a specific, skill set. I think that's one thing I would call out is that it is just, if you're not as confident in working in just Photoshop and just painting over, you're going to be more limited in what you can actually do. And so that's something I guess I would kind of pay attention to there. Even like a little upshot could be interesting. What I like to do when I'm doing these is I will go here. Let's say maybe I think this is an interesting angle. Sure. Framing. Under document, I'm going to tear this off. You can hit Z Uplink properties and you can hit any of these buttons. If you hit custom, what this does is it saves your camera view. So I can go back to this at any time, which is awesome because then I don't have to worry about, oh, hang on. There we go. I don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff right now. So it makes it a little bit easier. Now what I can do is I'm actually just going to use the snipping tool or a screenshot tool. And I'll screenshot this as close as I can. Copy. Jump into Photoshop and I'll paste it. And this is for me to just kind of understand what this will look like in context. So are there eye lines all kind of jumping all over the place? Are they at a consistent eye line? Is it, just generally, I guess the question is it working? right? Is this kind of working? And so that's kind of what I'm interested in right now. And so to me, I don't know what you guys think. I kind of like this one. So I'm going to definitely keep this up as an option. So yeah. Somebody's asking, how can I get good resolution in Substance? My UVs are in one box. That's a good question. We're not going to go through Substance today, so I can't really help you with that one right now. If your UVs are in one box, maybe it's the size of your textures. Maybe I don't know though. Good question. Let's see. I think we just clicked a link to the Gnomon brochure. So that's the online courses that was just shared in Restream. So if you guys, at least on Twitch and YouTube, go ahead and take a look at that. And hello, everybody who's joining. I think this is kind of a good one that I'm going to stick with. So I like kind of taking a break and kind of jumping back and forth with things. I do like a simple front, something like this. But again, that has her looking at to the right. What I could easily do here is I can go Deformation, Mirror, which will mirror the whole thing, and I can get more or less the same thing this way. So maybe we'll play around with her head turn. Does she have to be looking at the camera? I don't think so. A lot of them are looking at the camera. So maybe it is worth her having looking at the camera, doing something like this. Something a little bit more static. What I'll do is I'll go back into the app link, properties, I'll hit custom to, and this is where you can kind of do a camera A, camera B situation where you can go camera A, do I like this more? Camera B, do I like this more? I think they're both nice. I do kind of like the up shot a little bit more, but I kind of almost want to just push this up, clear this one, resave it. And so what I start doing is I eventually start selecting areas and finding a kind of a middle ground. So I have this one, and this one. Kind of like how this one's off the screen, but maybe a little too far, so we'll bring that in. This tight, hey, what's up, Lee? Hope you're doing well, man, on Facebook. How to sculpt in the right way? We got a question from YouTube without many errors and trials. Practice. That's the number one way to do that. That's the only thing I can really tell you is just keep practicing it as much as you can. So we got this one. I like how the helmet's sort of cut off here. We're kind of getting into this middle ground of like something that's going to be a little bit of everything. This also does back views. I thought about doing a back view of her because she has such iconic shapes, but I don't think that's really going to work out for this. And then there's always, we could just do like a more full body shot, I guess. Yeah, this perspective is pretty extreme right now, so I can go down into draw, try to dial that down. It will also affect the other shots that we did, so it's not going to have as much perspective. Hello, Ian. Ian Joiner on Facebook. Ian is an amazing artist who's working at Marvel right now. You should go check his work out. Also has a Gnomon Workshop DVD. That was the first Gnomon Workshop DVD I ever found was Ian Joiner's. So I highly recommend checking Ian's work out. All right, let's see what we got here. This one, A, B, and C, they're more or less flavors of the same thing. At this point, these are almost identical. I kind of like the up angle a little bit more, so I'm going to delete this one. We're just kind of whittling our ways down. And it's now, do we want to see more of the body or less of the body? So again, I'm going to do the same thing. Snip. I don't need to show my undo history. Thank you, Zbrush, in my screenshot. Cut this. Copy this. Paste it. Put it over here. And then we'll go back into ZBrush. We'll check out this other one. We'll do the same process over again. I don't think the snipping tool has a snip the same thing again, but it would be nice if it did. There are other screenshot programs that do that though. Akuma from Facebook is asking, or sorry, from YouTube is asking, can we, you're new at ZBrush, can we do photorealistic painting with polypaint in ZBrush? You can, but it is a little harder, right? I think ZBrush to me is more like a traditional airbrush. You can overlay textures and you can put those onto it, but at the end of the day, what you're really looking at is something, again, that is much more like an airbrush. So you're not going to get quite the, what's the right word? It's going to be a little harder, you know, it's going to be a little bit more time and effort to do that. All right, well, I don't like this one. I think I just like this one. I just want to do one last one that's maybe more of this kind of an angle. Now that we've got some other angles, so we've got kind of an up shot, which I think was this one. So I'm going to delete this one. And again, this is just kind of my process for finalizing what my render is going to be. Once we bake in with the render, this is what we have here. We're not going to really be able to move or reposition the character all that much. That is because we're going to be overlaying a lot of different layers on top of itself to composite the final image. And what happens is if you have the layers slightly off at all, you get this weird ghosting effect, and it just kind of destroys the whole effect of it. So let's go back to this one. I'll try this up shot. I kind of like this as well. It's a different take on more or less what we have now. And again, this is just to ideate. So like I said, the goal is to finish posing in 30 minutes. Rendering in the 30 minutes after that. And have a decent start on our painting process and compositing process at the end of the stream. So we have this one, which is an up shot, and we have this one, which is a down shot. I kind of like the down one the more that I keep looking at it because it's going to be a little different. We'll get to highlight a little bit more of the arm, which I'm happy with. I think you get a better read of the overall shapes of like the helmet and the shoulder pads and everything just reads a little bit better to me. So we're going to stick with that one. So that means we're going to close this. We don't need this anymore. We can minimize our Photoshop and we can make sure I have the right one. I'm just going to click this like 7 times to make sure that I at least have that angle. Then I'm going to delete that. Then I'm going to hit Save Views. Save Views actually writes out a little file, so it pops up this dialog here for me now. And I'm going to go into my folder here, and I'm going to save this little file. What I'm going to do is, now that we've done that, I'm actually going to just go back to making a document that is a window size. So we can work here. As you can see, all I really did was just turn her head. And that's pretty much it. Right. Now we're going to go close this document setting for now. I can go back into Z plugin, T-pose mesh, and you'll see it's going to cycle through all of these things and put the head where it should be. It looks like at some point I did move something around and there's some weird errors going on here, so we're going to have to fix those once this happens. I'm watching the Facebook stream right now, and one of my favorite things about the Facebook stream is you can have captions on, and they're auto-generated. So I love captions when they're auto-generated because it's just so strange. This to me is very odd. It looks like at some point I did move the whole character, which is a bummer. But what that means is I don't actually need to do this anymore since I did T-pose mesh. I'm just going to go and reload this tool because it ended up not serving me too well doing T-pose mesh. And let me just find the original file. If I was doing a bigger pose, I would spend a bunch of time getting it in the right position. But you can see it, for some reason, it's moving everything over and it's just doing it very strangely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and start playing around here. And I wanted to see also, there was one element that I had in here, which was this head that I had sculpted quite a while ago. I was going to use this as the visor so that this way I could have this in here. And I had forgot to do this anyways, but now I could have this, and you can see that we would be able to kind of position ahead. This visor, this helmet would never really work. So kind of trying to keep that into account, that it's not really something that's going to be effective for that. Um, our head will fit inside this helmet nicely, the render. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to select the helmet. I'm going to do basically what I did before. Draw an action line. You can use the gizmo if you prefer the gizmo. I'm still somebody who prefers the action lines. Turn off symmetry. Lower the resolution just so I don't have to deal with it. And fortunately, because these two tools are right where they need to be, I don't have to worry about it. One thing I'm going to do, though, is I am going to mask this section off in more or less the same way it was masked before. For some reason, I'm using my mouse. Off. And I'm going to basically set all these things up. So what I can do is I'm going to rotate this here. You can see a lot of these other subtools are not going to move along, and that's going to be okay. But because I can pop back and forth here, I can tell you kind of what I've done already. Now it looks like I also moved the helmet itself a little bit. So I'm going to undo this, and that's just from the actual neck joint being a little further back. So spin the helmet close to where it was. It's pretty close. Now I'm going to, without touching anything else, without adjusting any other subtools, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to other subtools and hit stroke, which is right here, replay last. I've set this to 7. If you hover over any button in ZBrush, you'll see that it'll have its hotkey next to it. So if I just hit 7 on this visor here, I'm going to make sure symmetry is off and I hit 7. It will move it in the same way that it did on the helmet, or should. It did not do that. All right, let's try that again. So we're going to undo. We're going to rotate. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to hit 7, which should do stroke replay last. And there we go, now that it's moving. I'm going to go to any of these other pieces. I can't actually click on the canvas, but I can, because that's considered a stroke. You can see that I did that one with symmetry on. Head doesn't really need to be there at the bottom. That's okay. We need to find this neck piece. You can also just hit the arrow keys here to cycle through your subtools. Once I get to that point, I'll see symmetry is on. I'm going to hit 7 again, which will do the same rotation. So now, even though that was multiple subtools, I was able to get the same movement on all of them. Now we're back where we were. So another way to do exactly what I was doing before, but just doing it on a per subtool basis. We got a question from Facebook asking, what focal length do you prefer while sculpting? Generally, under the draw size, I will use either 50 or 85. 85 is a little flatter. 50 is pretty good. I know a lot of people that sculpt without perspective on, though, so it doesn't really matter. I don't understand that. I really prefer to have perspective on, but some people don't. We got another question. Is it hard to animate inside ZBrush? Yes, there is some very simple and basic animation tools inside ZBrush, but ZBrush is not a full 3D package that is really includes animation tools. So that's not really something we're going to be doing. All right, let's see any other questions. Any other tips for dealing with multiple options and iterations of a character from a ZBrush workflow? I think you just got to be fast and loose and try to do things as quickly as you possibly can to iterate till you get to something that you like, and then kind of hone in and bury into those details. That's the way that I've seen it be more effective for me, for sure. Let's see what else we got in here in the chat. Daniel Kyle from Facebook is asking, So after you pose, you're going to go back to the high details in ZBrush or deal with that in a Photoshop paintover. A little bit of both. I've already sculpted in a lot of these details, and I'm not going to do a ton of stuff. I'm not going to do texturing in ZBrush right now. I'm going to do the bulk of it in Photoshop, kind of how I had done for all of these pieces here. These were all Photoshop paintovers to get to the final results. This one was actually just a lot of texture overlay to get this kind of texture. But this is ZBrush render. All three of these are. All right, so now we've got our pose. We have got our canvas almost set up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my document, and I'm going to go into set up my final resolution document. Now what I've been rendering at is 2,000 pixels wide by 6,000 pixels tall. When I hit resize, you're going to see it's going to say, are you sure you want to do that? I say yes. What you're going to see right now is that doesn't look like it changed it at all as what it did before, right? I'm going to have to hit the zoom button here on the right hand side, and that's going to zoom it all the way out. So zoom, and there you'll see I actually have the background there. So I can change the background to whatever color. We'll use black for now. And I'm going to, since I should already have this Z-App link loaded, I can click my previous camera that I saved, and it will load it up to more or less be the same. There is sometimes, due to the perspective or the document size, you'll see we might be having a very subtle difference in some of this. So I might want to spend a little bit of time. You'll see that it's not really even being adjusted due to the size of what we have here. So if the perspective was a big thing that I really wanted, I'll have to spend a little bit of time dialing that back in. So I'm seeing that I had this little angle here, kind of a little bit of the helmet cut in, and right now it doesn't really have that. So I'm going to go back to this, click this. Even though these are all the three same, just due to the size of the document, the canvas does change a little bit, and so that's something I want to try to remedy right now. You can see it's just slightly off. So bring a bit more of that helmet in. Even do a shift tilt. Even if I bring in something like this, you'll see that it's very slightly different. It looks like my helmet pose did move a little bit. Not really a problem. If I want to fix that, that's pretty easy. I might just shift this whole helmet over. We're going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to hit 7 on this. I'm going to hit 7 on this head, and then hit 7 on this. And that's just going to move all those at the same way that it was before. Let's see. Bribarian is asking from Twitch, what do you think of Blender sculpting compared to ZBrush? I haven't really used it, to be super honest with you. I'm a pretty big ZBrush fan, so it's a little hard for me to say. I think personally, there's a lot of great things happening with Blender right now, but ZBrush is still, for me, the number one sculpting package that I use. It's also the number one sculpting package that I see professionals using as well. So it seems like it's got a lot of really great stuff, but I don't know if it's fully there yet. Seems cool though. Not trying to say it's not good, just saying I've never used it and I don't see it used as much in a professional setting. Just getting this last little bit done. This is taking a little longer than I expected it to, just because of the movement of that stuff. I think this is actually all right. So you can see even there's some more subtle adjustments. So this one is the one that I want. So now I'm going to save this one more time. I'm going to save this as, same as views 2 or something like that. It is saved, and now I can start doing my renders. All right. Here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start getting some basic ones. I'm going to get some basic lighting ones. Now I do have, oh, it was on my other laptop. I had one that was more of like a reflective surfaces. Now I do have some of these pre-built metal materials, and one of the things I should probably do is I can go into my subtools at this point, and I should hit all high, or just go through them all, and which is all high right here. That's going to take all my subtools and bring them to the highest level so that you can see these details a little more crisp. We can zoom at this point into this, and you'll see what we're actually going to be working with here, right? Which is cool. One thing I should probably do is see where this head is, if I'm going to introduce that at all. I've thought about it. I'll probably just have to fake it and kind of bring this down a little bit. I don't know if I really am going to use this, but we'll have it in here just in case. And it even has some, oh, look at that perspective. That's part of why I don't know if I'm going to use it. We'll have it there just in case. I kind of like this just look that we have here, though. All right, so what we're doing is we are going to take a look at some materials. Now, this metal materials and all this stuff is actually going to be really helpful for us. I'm going to just get a couple things out of the way first. I'm going to do a basic material that has no lighting information on it, no color information on it, and we're going to start with that. Zoom. There we go. That should be good enough. Okay, so with the basic materials, the standard materials, these can all accept light, whereas any of the matte cap materials cannot accept light. So I'm going to bring this over to our left-hand side is fine. Light. There we go. What I mean by that is if I move the slide around, you'll actually be able to see the light changing. Whereas if I go under a matte cap material, we can use any of these reflecting orange, for example. If I move this around, nothing happens. Now, these are still really good, and we're still likely going to use them, especially for their more reflective properties. But what I want to kind of do is check out some of these materials, and you'll notice that these have the light actually moving around them. You can add color to them. I've already added colors to all these things, but they don't seem to accept light information is good. This is just a reflective ball, for example, but reflected plastic is one that I've used quite a bit. You'll see that you can have that, and even then, it doesn't accept the color in quite the way that I would expect it to. So we'll play around with some of these. We'll play around with some of these metal materials. You can see these here, right? And we'll find something that works. There is no emissive materials in Zbrush. I've just painted the actual visor itself to appear to be emissive, like it's emitting light. We will probably play with that though. So this is where we get to choose what our actual illustration is. So knowing what we've got here, we can play with a bunch of different elements here. I think I'm just going to do a relatively straightforward setup. And I'm going to start with a basic material to get our lighting. And I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to turn all of our color off. And what I'm going to do is play with this light to get our key light. Now when I hit Shift R or this little button up here that says BPR, you can hit this button right here. You'll see this little orange slider go across the top. Actually, you won't see this orange slider going across the top. It is going across the top. And what that's going to do is it's going to do the actual render itself. Because of the size of the image that we're rendering at, which is a 2000 by 6000 image, it's going to take a little bit of time. But you'll see it gets nice here. One thing I am going to do is I'm going to actually just select this leg piece here. I'm just going to add a subdivision to it, and maybe two, just so it gets a little smoother. I am going to paint out a lot of these details, like you see down here at the bottom. It was very pixelated, but it's also kind of, not pixelated, but like faceted, I guess is another word that I would use. And that's totally fine. What we do with that is we're just going to, almost hit the in stream button while I was trying to change my tabs. That would have been bad. What I'm going to do with that is I'll paint it out in Photoshop using the mixer brush. So we'll get into that in the next hour or so. So I'm going to turn down my S-Pix here. This is the anti-aliasing. What that means is when I actually do a render, Zbrush using BPR is using anti-aliasing in it. And what I want to have happen as I render is it goes a little faster. So this is another render, and you see that went significantly faster than it did the previous time. What I'm also going to open here, we have our document properties. We can actually collapse those. So I'm going to open my render properties and toss those over here. Here we're going to have all of our BPR passes. You'll see these are a lot of the things we're going to composite. This is a Z-depth pass, shadow passes, shaded passes, and masks, and all that kind of fun stuff. Which is great. So we're going to be using all that. And what we're going to be doing is starting to render. So now I'm going to probably have at least one key light that's going to be here, but I'm going to adjust my shadow settings here. I'm probably going to give us, not the filters, the shadow. I'm going to give us that bigger angle. The angle is what creates a crisp or not crisp shadow. So if I give it like a 50 angle, which is relatively high, you're going to see as this renders that now the shadow is very soft, right? Whereas if I change this angle over here to 0 and I hit BPR again, you'll see this line is going to be a very sharp shadow, right? Now you'll see that the quality of the shadow is not great, but when we have it at 50. That's because we were using 12 rays. What that means is essentially we have 12 individual light sources or rays, and we're spreading them out at an angle of 50. And so what you're seeing when, we'll zoom in here so you can actually see it. So this is the crisp one, and I'll do one more render here. You'll see that this is going to get you'll almost see the 12 rays themselves. So 1, 2, you can kind of see them overlapping. 50 is probably a little high. We'll go to like 25. We will not be using GoZ or any type of plugin to get to Photoshop. We're just going to be exporting the actual renders to get to Photoshop. So you can go to Document, Export, and we'll be doing that. Or under the BPR passes, if you click these little buttons, this will create a dialog that will export a PSD. So you don't need to do that. So now you'll see these 12 rays, and they kind of stack up amongst each other. So if I go back to our shadow properties, if I up the rays, we'll up it to, let's go to 50. And I hit BPR one more time. Now it's going to take longer because instead of 12 rays, we're using 50. So that's more or less 4 to 5 times longer. So the render itself is going to take 4 to 5 times longer because you're using that many more rays. But if you look right here, you're going to see that that's going to get a lot smoother. So the actual shadow quality is going to be significantly better. You can also adjust this blur, which is an actual blur like a Gaussian blur, which will blur the actual image itself. So we can do this, we'll make that go back down to 0, go back to 12 rays, and let's say we have blur at 0. We render this. Very, very, very crisp, right? Whereas if I go to 3, it was at 2 before, but if I hit 3, you'll see this edge is going to get blurred quite a bit. Oop, accidentally bumped it. Put it back where it was. It's important, otherwise those images don't line up. It's a little crisper. So we're going to go back to saying, for now we'll have 12 rays, so it's a little smaller. We're going to have an angle of 20. We're going to crank this res up when we're ready to do our final renders to probably 8,000 or 16,000. What that is it's the actual map that's being cast over. Got it. All right. Now that will also take longer because the map is at this point quadrupling in size. So I don't want to come in when I'm doing all these test renders. What I don't want to do is start at the highest settings all the time for no reason. It just will take longer. So I think that's going to look good. For now, I'm going to start with these default kind of settings, and I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to make sure that this is a key light that I'm happy with. And I think for me, it is. So what that means is that now that I am happy, I'm going to do this through several different areas. You can come in here and you can save lights. So I can save a light. we're in Samus, and I'll say like key light. If I go and I move this and then I load it and I load this key light, it'll go back to where it was. So I'm saving that light. So that's why I'm not going to go in and adjust, you know, each one of these and render them out one at a time. Got it? All right, so we're going to go ahead and make a rim light. So we know we're going to have a light from the front. We're going to need to have a light from the back. I'm going to do one from each side. If you click on the actual lights in ZBrush, it'll put it in the back. And this is kind of what we're going to get out of that. So I can put one far in the back. I like this one because it seems to be creating a really nice defining shape here, but it could maybe be a little bit more on the side. That's a pretty cool shapes that it's creating. So I really dig that. So I'm going to save this, rim 1, go onto this side as well. Just do a side light, this is almost more like a fill light at this point. I kind of like that, so I'm going to save this as fill 1, and then we'll even do maybe like a kind of an underlight here. Click it to be the front. Kind of an interesting up shadow. I like this quite a bit actually. So we're going to save this and we're going to say up fill. Cool. So now we've got something that's kind of working like that. All right, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into some of our other materials. So we've got our key lights and we're going to start jumping into other things. This is all using the basic materials, so we don't have to worry about that. Here is some weird things that people might not usually expect. These types of reflected materials, these types of things, most people don't really know what they're used for. They're likely used for this. So if I'm going to load my key light, see that it is adjusting to that. But what you can do is we're going to use this to overlay or screen and put this on top of something already to make it feel like it's more metal. So we're going to have this one. And at this point, you know, now that I've kind of got the bulk of things, I'm actually feeling like I can go in and just start rendering. So let's go back to that. For some reason, something is acting strange. Let's see. ZBrush. Oh, it's because it's trying to load the light. There we go. Let's load our key light. Let's go back to our basic material. And you can use any of these if you like the skin shade, if you want it to start as more of a white material, which can be a little easier to work with sometimes. Work with that. That's totally fine. I like to usually work with the basic material and then paint to white and also this character is not going to have a lot of white because it's reds and yellows and greens and stuff like that. So basic material, key light, we're going to bump the raise up to 50, leave the angle, we're going to bump the res up to 1600 on this, I'm going to leave the blur. We're going to add our anti-aliasing to 3, change that. We're also going to go into our render properties and we're going to select Ambient Occlusion. Now this is one that's going to take a little while and we only have to do it once. So I only make sure that this is on the very, very, very first time that we do this. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and hit render. Now you guys aren't going to see this, but it's probably going to take about a minute, maybe 2 minutes to do this render because we're doing ambient occlusion. We're doing our shadows, which are bigger. We're doing bigger rays, which are bigger. We're doing a lot, just more at one time. So this will likely take about a minute to 2 minutes sometimes. My countdown is currently at 1 minute, but we'll get there. But now's a good time. I'm just going to switch over while we're working. This is rendering. I'll let you guys know when this is done. If you guys have any questions about GNOME and if you guys have any questions about things, please feel free to ask them in the chat. We've had a lot of good questions already. We got one question that says, what channels do you need from ZBrush? Sorry, you just came in. No worries. Welcome to the stream. We're going to be mostly exporting all these renders and we're going to be overlaying them onto each other, basically, and compositing them. So we're not really looking for channels right now, but that's a good question. That means you're obviously aware of compositing and channels and stuff like that. So that's great. This looks like it's going to end up taking about 4 minutes. That's my guess. So that's okay. How are you guys doing out there? Is everything going well? Hopefully things are good. You know, we got a lot of crazy things happening in the world, so hope you guys are staying safe. Oh, it looks like it did just end up finishing. So here's our final beauty render of that light. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down into render pass. You'll see that this now has a composite and a shaded view. Composite has the background in it. This does not. This also shows you the depth. This is a floating RGB, and this is an RGB. This is 32-bit, 32, 32, 32, and this is says it's at 96. So I'm going to click shaded. When I click shaded, it's going to create a render. It's saying it's called render. We're going to call this light key 1. I click on depth. It's going to do the same. Shadows going to be the same. AO is going to be the same. And it's very, very easy to get all these out. That's the one again. And we'll also get a mask out of this. So that's awesome. Quickly, we have all of those. And now what I need to do is I'm going to turn off AO. Because we already rendered AO once, we don't have to do it again, which is amazing. So now I'm going to load those previous lights. We have our fill light, and I'm going to hit render, Shift R. So as this is rendering, we're going to keep moving along. All right, these take a little bit of time because it's actually calculating the shadows on the surfaces, whereas the matte caps will be rendering later don't really take as much time. And that means we can actually turn shadows off on them because we already have a shadow or our shadow maps. So there we go. Go into render pass. All I want here is the shaded one. So this is fill and the shadow, fill, shadow. We're going to load a rim, render. At this point, once things are set up relatively quickly, this process doesn't take very long. Just a little bit of waiting time, especially if you've done any real-time rendering or like full-time rendering, it doesn't take like any time at all in comparison. Can we get quality renders in Zbrush? Yeah, of course you can get quality renders in Zbrush. You know, all of these, for example, are renders in Zbrush that I've spent time painting over. You know, I like the Zbrush render style for me because it's something that feels more illustration. So yeah, you can get great renders out of Zbrush. Rafael Grossetti is another person who does lots of renders out of Zbrush, or has. Take a look at his workflow. I think he has a tutorial up on Gumroad to check out as well if you're interested in that. Here we go. And now we'll load up just this upfill, which is a pretty cool shot. I like this one. Yes, we will be saving this to YouTube. We're actually in the process of uploading all of our previous art jams to YouTube. I think this is Art Jam episode 15. So we're going to create a playlist that you can view all the previous ones that were only on Twitch before, and then we'll keep adding to them now. So there's one up from last week, which is episode 14, and I believe 13 is up as well. But we have some editing we have to do of we've had some technical issues previously in the streams and needing to combine some of the stream videos that were cut because of disconnects and tech issues. So they will all be up on YouTube for sure. So now we have this up shot. So we'll have up, up, fill, I guess. We want those shadows as well. Great. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn off shadows entirely, right? I'm going to load just or get this back to kind of a beauty render here. Turning off shadows is going to make it not have to take as much time. And I'm going to come in here and get a couple of these. I like this chrome one, so I'm going to just hit Control R. You see how quickly that went. I did just realize that I didn't have any of my anti-aliasing on for all those renders, which is a bummer. But they're because of the size of them and how much paint over I'm going to do, I think they're going to look okay. For this, I'm going to do it anyways. Turn on that because I want the quality of the matte cap. And there we go. Same thing. Render pass. Now I can click this and I'll just write Chrome. Just click on this one. PPR. Andrew Mark Stout, hello, sir. Hope you're doing well. Good question. He's asking, when you're working on details while sculpting, how do you measure how far you will go detailing into the design? I think that's kind of a personal choice, and also depends on what the project is. If we're working on a film or a game, likely you're taking the support level detail, almost always. If you are doing something like this, which is for illustration, it really depends on what your end goal of the illustration is. Do you want it to be a super high-res photoreal illustration? Do you want it to be something that's more animated? And that's kind of a hard call to make. So it really depends on what your project is. Let's see. Yes, that is a Yoshimitsu figure. You can see, I think, right here. Yes, that is one of Raf's figures. I bought it at Lightbox last year. Cavity map. This is one of my favorite ones. You can see that it kind of creates this like lines. Now, when I hit render, what it actually is going to do is most of those are likely going to go away. For some reason, the matcap just doesn't like that. So I'm actually going to create two. I'm going to do cav 1, and then I'm going to switch back to it again. And I'm just going to actually just export this. You can export as PSDs as well. So I'll keep that one. How can you make a custom material for ZBrush? A lot of these are downloaded. So I found these. There's one person on ZBrush Central. His name is Undoz, UNDOZ. He has tons of different materials. You can also go on there. They used to have a download site. I believe they still do. Check those out. All kinds of cool stuff there. But using these different types of framers, using these different types of materials, I'll select this so that it's highlighted. You can get some cool looks in here. So what I like to do is at some point just export some of these just for the effects that they're going to give. Right? I think that's always cool. I'm going to get this red one out. I'm going to do a yellow one, and I'm going to do the orange one because those just happen to be the colors that Samus is, and they also just happen to be the colors that ZBrush has by default. So we're going to get these. Red, yellow, yellow, and orange, which isn't like that different from this, but we'll render it anyways. It'll give us a good starting point for when we start doing our paint overs. Cool, orange. All right, so here we got the basics of everything we're really going to need. We could get in here and maybe get some of these top light things. Some of these matte caps can be great for certain uses. I'll render out a bunch of these so that as for the next couple hours we can see what they can do. Sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. I think it's worth the time to often render them because you never really know what's going to look great or not. Let's see, is there anything else in here that I want? Like there's a metal matte caps. It's a little intense on the metal, but we'll try it. I like to go through these and just kind of see how things are looking. This is a nice one. We'll choose that. Again, a lot of this is exploratory. So when we get into Photoshop, you're going to see me quickly try these And if within 5 to 10 seconds it doesn't look good, I'm going to throw it away. I'm going to delete it. But because it's so fast to get these renders out, you know, it doesn't really hurt to try. It does take up a lot of disk space. These are each 35 megs a piece. That's about it. All right, let's see. Any of these are the last ones that we need, where that would be interesting. Sometimes I'll use an outline like this for illustration's sake. Wirt is asking from YouTube, I'm thinking about applying to Gnomon. I know you can speak to admissions advisors and all, but I wonder if anyone has suggestions about where I can post work to and get constructive feedback. Online communities are definitely the best for that. And again, just the admissions advisors are, to talk about that quickly, they work with you on your portfolio and they can give you constructive feedback as well. So that's another place. But there's Discord channels, there's places like Zbrush Central, trying to find things like that. Definitely forums are I've always found to be the best. Didn't expect that one to look cool, but I'm going to give it a shot. The challenge with some of these is it has a lot of non-natural lighting. So sometimes it'll look great and sometimes it'll look like your lighting is coming from all over the place. So that's probably good enough for now. I can, if I wanted to, I could go ahead and do a file save, or a file, where is it? Document? Oh, I lost it. Save as, file save as. And this will save the whole project. So I'm going to save this. So I'm going to say Samus renders. What this does is it takes all the tools, all the canvas settings, all the perspective settings that I've done, and saves them. All right. So now that we've got that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need, and I think we're good to go. So I'm going to actually just minimize ZBrush for now. I would likely close it, but we won't do that just yet. So now that I've got my big old folder here of things, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag in one that I know is a color image. Some of them are not, meaning they're like in modes that are like they're in mode like grayscale or something else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab Z. Z is one that I always do, which is basically this material here. And just bring this in here. I'm going to close this. I'll save it before I close it. A relatively large file. And then I'm going to grab all the rest of my, you'll see over here, I'm grabbing all the rest. I have some files and things in here that don't need to. But I'm just going to grab them and drop them in here. And now what it's doing is it's placing them in. So I'm just going to enter a bunch. And you might hear some keyboard clacking. And it's just going to overlay every single one of these. So it's done. Cool. So now we have that. We get to start playing, and this is actually one of my favorite parts of the process is the painting process, the overlay process, where we get to really start to figure out what our final illustration is going to be. So you'll see that if I hit 100%, this is the size of the actual image in Photoshop, so it's pretty large. And I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to right click and I'm going to select rasterize layers, and that's going to take them from being a smart object to being a rasterized image. I'm also at this point going to go save as, and in my Samus folder, I'm going to say Samus, how's it, or Samus image comp. All right, now that that's saving, this is going to take a little while to save because it's a lot of big files overlaid on each other. I'm basically going to scroll through and turn them all off. And we're going to find some of those ones that we liked. And we're going to find the shadow one is a good one. We're going to go fill screen with the image here. And we're going to go fill so you can start to see some of these here. Oh, you know what? I did forget a couple things. I knew I was forgetting something. I'm going to go into flat color. I'm going to get 2 more renders out. And first I'm going to turn on this. This is just going to give me a very rough image of what the actual color can be. This is basically just my material. I think that head is in there. I don't want that head in there. Got it. All right, cool. So now what I can do is just do this one, color, cool. And then I'm also going to basically mess up all my color. I'm going to go from the very top to the very bottom, and I'm going to turn RGB on, and I'm going to turn color. I'm going to hold down Control and Alt, and I'm going to say, what would be a good 9? Control and Alt. I'm going to select the number 9. So I just set a hotkey for number 9 for fill object. And I'm going to go from the very top, and I'm going to just select a color, and I'm going to hit 9. And it's going to fill that color. I'm going to hit down on my arrow key. I'm going to slightly move this, and I'm going to hit 9. Hit down. That one wasn't visible, so that's okay. So I hit 9. Make sure my mask is cleared. 9. What I'm doing right now is I'm basically creating a clown pass. Colors. Down, move this, 9, go down. Something is looking strange to me. We'll just select the ones that we see. That's because they're not all in frame. This one could use something. And we'll just say red again. So this is a clown pass. Basically what this does is it creates a very easy way for us to select those areas. So I'm going to hit BPR again. Shouldn't take too long. And I'll say clown. Now I'll hide that. That's why I didn't close Zbrush. I knew there was a reason. So we'll go in here and we'll get these 2 images. We'll lay them in. Pop, pop. And now we have these. So this is what I needed. So again, I'm going to rasterize these. And we're more or less on my schedule. I'm hoping to get all the renders done within an hour, and we basically got there. So that's good. We got a question from YouTube, which was when you use a matte cap for metallic material, a lot of M's there, because you want those reflections, for example, how do you get rid of the color that's included in the material? You'll see what I do with that. Likely I'll just desaturate it though. That to me seems to be the easiest way, is just desaturate it. All right. Clown pass, I put at the top. I'm going to make this a little larger. Clown pass goes at the top. You see all these shadow passes. A mask pass goes at the top. I can select the mask, go into channels, control click. You're going to see it's done the little mask selection here for me. And what I'm going to do now is actually click this mask button, and that's going to create a mask based on that. What I can do is create an empty layer. Let's fill it with a color. We'll just pick a dark gray. And I can drag, holding down Alt, applying that mask to that layer. And then I can actually Control I, invert the mask that I just put on there so that it's only showing the outside, which is nice. What that means is I now more or less have a something that's overlaying everything. So when I put on any materials, regardless of what pass it is, what image it is, I have a background here that I can change. And I can now adjust this color. Darker, I can make it lighter, I can do whatever I want, but it's basically a way for me to put my mat that has my background there very, very easily. So we're going to go through all these. Colors, another big one. I'm going to put that, we're going to play with that probably somewhere down here. What I'm more or less trying to do now is I'm trying to find all of the ones that I said that were like up a fill or a shadow, and I'm going to drag them towards the bottom. If there's something that's more experimental, like something like this, I drag it towards the top. So I want my key light, I want my shadows kind of all lined up here. So I have my fill light, my upfill, my fill light, my upfill, my key, and I'm looking for my rim. So rim is here, and I want my rim shadow, which is here. So these are my four main light sources. I'm also going to grab my color. I'm going to bring that down here. What I'm going to do with color is first you can just put it on overlay or multiply, and you'll see what that's going to do right away. Right, it basically gives us a very quick preview of what the image is going to look like. Now, for me, color and multiply doesn't always work as well. You can use overlay, and that to me seems to be a little bit more successful. And sometimes I might just duplicate this a couple times to get more of the intensity that I'm really hoping. So maybe I duplicate it and then collapse it into one, and that's the color that I want. And the reason that that's more successful is because the colors I actually had were relatively muted, right? So when I overlay those two layers, if I just put this on overlay and it's the exact same thing, this is the colors that I'm getting. And to me, for Samus, this is more the color that I want. So I could just merge that down, and then I can put that on overlay. And so that'll give us a really nice starting point for all of our renders. And the cool thing you're going to see here is that now that lighting, or sorry, that color is being affected with all of these lights. Which is pretty awesome, because now we're getting something that's, really starting to work. So this is why I don't use color in my base layer. I saw some questions and stuff that were asking about that. I don't really need to do that, because what we're doing in working in this way that is more of a composite is more effective for me than it is to do it in another way. So we're going to start with fill. Sorry, we don't actually need this one. This is one can go up top. We're going to start with our key and put that at the bottom. I'm going to turn on overlay, or this is still on. Start with our key, and we're going to turn on our overlay color just so we have it. And I'm going to turn on my fill light here. What I'm going to do with my fill light is I'm actually just going to turn down the opacity of this. And all that's really doing is it's, bringing in the intensity of the other one. But you'll see that it starts to create a pretty nice quality of an image. The lower I go, the more it will have of the original render. I'm realizing now that on stream you guys can't see the very top of her head, so I'm going to attempt. I just push to the side. Sorry. See if I can get you guys a little bit better of a view here. There we go. So you get a little bit better quality of an image, right? When you start bringing this up. And zero. Oh, I have something that's happening. There we go. All right, that's a little closer. So as we dial this up, notice how like the intensity of those highlights, which are pretty brutal to be honest, early, start to go away. It creates just a little bit more of a natural shadowing. Now this is going to happen with any of these that we turn on. I'm going to turn these all on. I'm going to turn them all to 0, the intensity, and we'll see how it looks. So right now I'm going to use this upfill, and it's going to shift the lighting to go to the bottom. Now I actually really like this uplighting right here, so I'm thinking that I might do something more of this type of a lighting, which is a combination of those two lights, rather than this light. Right, so this is the key light that we had, and then I kind of like this more. But note that this doesn't really work without having the other lights. I can reverse this too. But we'll kind of, and maybe I start that way. And a lot of this is a bit of playing, right? So this needs to be brought to 100%. This needs to be brought up. So it's almost like you can Gnomon loan you out to Nintendo to work on Prime 4, please? That would be a fun project to work on for sure. I would love to work on a Prime project. I'm really liking this lower lighting, but I'm wanting it to be, I don't know, playing around with this right now. This is always the most important step, right? Getting the, I think I had like 77 before. I kind of like this. There's maybe a little too much focus down here for me. I'll make a layer that we can actually draw on. Maybe a little too much focus of light on here for me. So that's something I might try to work on. Kind of like this. So now I can go into my fill light and I can see with this how this plays with this as well. Now what I can tell you right now is notice how when I get to this middle level, it just flattens the whole thing out. Right, super flat. So if I go too far, it's basically going to overwrite what I had. And what that means to me is I don't really need a lot of this fill. So if I give it a little bit, maybe they might cut the edge off of some of that intensity. Not a ton. I don't want to lose a lot of it. And then we'll use our rim. So the rim should be coming from the top right, and that's what we want. So we can do this a couple ways actually with the rim. Now if we go too far, you'll see it'll lose it, and then it'll eventually overtake it, right? So I want to actually try something different here. And instead of having it as a normal, meaning it's just this render, I'm going to change this to lighten, or I'm going to change it to screen. This kind of block of, in case you guys have never used the, or don't know what these layers mean, blending modes mean, this block here darkens images and applies the black images, the black parts of the image to the image. This block here applies the brighter or white parts of the image to the image. This combines them, and this does other effects, right? So if I put in lighten or screen or dodge or any of these, we're going to see that it's actually affecting it slightly differently. I kind of like how lighten is accepting the red highlight here. And once it's selected, you can actually hit the down arrow. I think screen is it's like a little too soft on the image. But for me, it's either color dodge, lighten. I'm going to put it on lighten. And at this point, I can dial this up and down as well. Because it's only taking, we'll duplicate this layer so you can kind of see what it's actually doing. But because it's only, we'll hide this. And we zoom in. What we're doing with the lighten layer is we are having just the white bright parts affect the image, right? So when I think of it as a screen print, it's only taking the bright parts here, and we're choosing how much of the bright part we want it to take. So if I delete this and I have this on lighten, what you'll see is it's only bringing in those parts. If I want to have more of that, I just duplicate the layer, right? Or I go in here and I do a curves adjustment, or I do a levels adjustment, and I actually change the layer itself. So we'll turn this on. We've got a pretty nice base here for what we want to be doing. Trying to get you guys the best view possible. So I kind of like what we've got. The rim is working. The fill, I'm not fully set on, so maybe I might play around with the idea of doing that as a lighten or a screen, because even just taking it away from that is working pretty well. No, I'm gonna leave it this way. I can always paint up, paint to white. It's a little easier that way. All right, and then we have this. Now we have all of, I'm gonna pull this color layer up. And I just want to do a couple things before we really get into some more of this fun stuff, which is up here, right? This is us establishing the base for our scene, and we should often be saving, like I just did. Shadow layers, right? I'll turn this color off, because this is what these layers look like. Now, knowing what you hopefully know now from what I just showed you about what the blocks of the adjustment layers actually do, what we can do with this is pretty cool, because I can take this and I can put it, I'm going to hide the rest of these. And so we know that this is what we're looking at now. I'll turn color on, but actually have it. I can take this, and if I put it as multiply, it's only taking the black part of that. So I can get that information back. It was starting to get lost because I was having so many different layers overlaying on each other. I can have that back and can really drive up amounts of detail as well. Now, I liked this up shadow one quite a bit. So if I turn this to multiply, similar thing. So now I can get that really moody kind of shadow, which is really what I was wanting, right? So I can get that moody shadow. I can have that back. If I ever want to use this fill shadow, right, I don't think that's going to be very useful for me. So I can actually just delete that layer. Like I said at the beginning of this, if we need to, we just delete things. And this is our rim shadow. So note that you can also invert that. You can use it as lighten or screen and see if certain things happen. Doesn't always work, but sometimes it can create a cool effect. Also use overlay, different effects here. So we'll play with that in a sec. But this up shadow one, we have this. This is great. Can use overlay as well. Again, just because it looks crazy at 100% doesn't mean it's going to have to, right? If we want to pop a little bit of color, pop shadows, this is a good way for us to do that. Overlay and soft light are really good at creating contrast. So you're going to see that it's going to push the lights and the darks with this image, which is fine. I'm going to put it on, for this one, I'm going to put it on multiply. I'm going to turn it all the way up. But this is where we get to have a lot of control, because if we don't want it all the way there, we just dial it down. We can get a little bit of that drama back. Now this top one, I do kind of like this one, but maybe I just want to dial that quite a ways down as well. So now with these two shadow layers, we're getting just a little bit more of that detail back that we had before. Josh Fryer from YouTube is asking, do I have any courses that I'd recommend that would cover my hard surface workflow? My hard surface workflow is kind of on the Gnomon workshop on a couple of the tutorials that I've done there. But I don't. If you're looking for a course and something where you can really get your hands into, we have online courses that have hard surface modeling classes that you can take. So I would recommend those for sure. All right, so we've got our shadows and we've got our rim. I don't think this rim is really going to be useful for us. I was going to see if maybe if I dial it like way, way, way down, but I don't think that really does anything for us here. So I'm just going to delete it. Gone. Okay, so now what we can do. Let's see. What should we do at this point? I think at this point we're kind of looking for... here's one thing I wanted to do. That's right. So note that again, this, I'm going to show you guys a little tip. It doesn't always work, but it's something that's fun to play with. I'm going to create a layer, a hue and saturation layer. I'm going to colorize this layer, right? Now what this is doing is it's colorizing the layer that's underneath it, every layer that's underneath it. Now if I have it under here, you'll notice that it colors all those things combined. But I can go to one individual layer, turn these off. Well, we'll leave them on. And I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to click on that. And that's going to make a clipping mask, and that's only going to affect the layer below it. So I can make this, and I can duplicate this to all of these layers as well. I'm going to turn these off for now. But what I can do is I can go into it, and I can colorize. And we're going to crank this up, right? This is our key light. This is the one that's maybe more of a blue light. So maybe the blue, the light that's actually coming in, there is no pure white light. So the white, this light maybe is a bluish light. We'll turn this down a little bit. And we'll go into our next one, our fill light. We know that our fill light is kind of an up light. And one of my favorite things about Samus is, sometimes she's in lava or stuff like that. So let's colorize that with a really blue, like a really warm light. So we're able to individually color each one of these lights, which is a really cool thing. And so you can do that with this rim light. Let's say it's a rim light. Let's make it like a really... oh, sorry, it's the fill light. Fill light's only like 2%, 12%. So we'll make this like... We'll keep that in the blue vein. And turn that opacity way down, though. And then we'll do another one, and we'll put this on the rim light. The rim light gets to be whatever color I want. Typically, rim lights get to have like the most intense colors, most intense values, right? So if I want to do something that's like a nice red, if I want to do something that's a nice blue, we can do that. But notice this is all on the gray shaded model. Like if I turn all these off, this is what it looks like. It's just pure gray. So but because we're affecting each of the individual layers and we're watching them get overlaid on top of each other, we're actually getting a pretty nice image quality, which is cool. So I'm going to take this and now I'm going to pop on that color. Right now, this is where it gets a little crazy, and this is where, here, like for example, our color intensity might be a little intense, right? Maybe we do want to go back to multiply, or we need to kind of dial down what we've got here. But you can see the difference of this is not necessarily looking great because I think this is looking better, to be honest. But I can start coloring each element of this, and I can still adjust it afterwards. So if red looks better, So we'll also pop these shadows back on. And the nice thing is this technique, you can do with everything. So I'm going to actually take this. We'll just put this like 75. I think part of the problem is that I chose this red here. It's really intense red. It's kind of overtaking a lot of things. So let's go back up here, pump that back up. And let's dial down now some of these intensities. I'm actually going to take these and put these on the shadows too. We'll play with those in a sec. So let's start one at a time. Now that you kind of have the concept here, we'll do it in the actual product, right? Which is this. Okay. All right, so we'll add our warm. This is our general warm tone, I think, or sorry, cool tones. That's working. This warm is maybe a little too warm for me because there's so much warm in her costume. This one is adding kind of a weird thing to it, so I'm going to just dial that down, the saturation of it quite a bit. And then the rim, I like a lot, but I don't think that color's working, so we can maybe do a blue. You know, if you want to go crazy and do like a white, oh, that's this. You can go just white if you want it to be. I kind of want to try to get like this orangish rim. And then we can do this to shadows as well. So turn the saturation up quite a way so we can see it. And you'll be able to see this one. Kind of maybe try to get some blues or something in there in these shadows, or reds in these shadows, depending on what we're looking for. This is also a good way if you're trying to get a very specific tone. It's really good for that. So more or less, it doesn't add a lot right now, but I think when you kind of see them all combined, here we'll do a quick Control A. Copy everything, paste everything on top, turn them all off. Where we were, this is where we are, this is where we were. So it's a little bit of a difference. It's not a massive difference, but you do see that you're getting a lot more of that color in, which is nice because it just makes it feel a little bit more natural. All right, now to Control Aid all of this, there's a couple things I can do. First, this scene starts to get really busy. It's really heavy. So I'm actually going to save first. Right now my saving is being completed. It's completed. I'm going to save another version with just another iteration after it. And that's done. Because I've already gotten all of these individual renders and I have all those source files, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to grab them all down here. I'm going to delete them. This just saves a bunch of your file space. It makes it so it's easier, you know, for you to work on. Basically, it's just a lot simpler to use. Now we're going to get play around with, we'll bring this color one up. We don't need that right now though. We have our clown pass. This is so we can create masks. We have our mask. We have our cavity. We'll just start overlaying things. So let's see what we can do. Here's red. This is one of the ones we played with before. We could have tried this below. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on soft light. I'm going to just kind of go through some of these materials and see what it would look like. And we already had the color, and I think the color is already looking pretty good, so I'm not expecting this to do much. But what you can see is in some of these areas, it is looking okay. Now, one thing I think that is probably true, I haven't tried this yet, is I'm going to actually open this, and I'm going to desaturate it. I'm going to desaturate this. The difference between, don't know why that's doing that. Oh, that's at 0, right? Oh, it's at pin light. Why is it on pin light? The difference between these reflective materials is just a little bit of the actual reflection itself. Right, so there's just a little bit more reflective or less reflective. These ones aren't even that different at all. I like the red one the most because it has the most, so I'm going to select these and just leave it as this. So if you want to just get the material quality out of that, just select it, and then you can choose it as something with a soft light and overlay a light in the screen or something like that and see what you can get in there. So like I said, I wasn't really expecting a lot of that one. I kind of like the material quality that it's giving there, but it's not really doing enough. Not really doing enough to be useful, so we're going to delete it. Metal. Metal, let's see if we can get something out of this metal. And this might be a point where we say, okay, do I need to bring back in color? Right, we have all this nice stuff down here, or stuff up here. Maybe it's worth exploring, turning this off for a minute, turning on a color, turning on some metal. And saying, what does it look like if we turn this down now? Just a little bit to get some of that metal material in there. We're losing a little bit of our lighting, which I'm not happy with, but we can always bring that back. More or less, I'm just going through these different, that's not bad. Going through these different layers and playing with them to see what they could do, what they can add to the surface. Like that one feels okay. We'll bring this back down. Can also take some of these more reflective ones, and this is just a pure reflection. Like the metals that we're doing are at the actual surface, right? And that's why it's being a little more challenging. Not too bad. So that's a potential one. I don't like this one. This one is potential, but I don't really love it. So I'm going to delete it. Reflection. This is where you could use light in your screen or something like that. And this you'll see immediately is much more of actually what we're looking for because it's just the reflections. So especially on this helmet, like you can see a very different reaction with this, well, not that, this or this is a very different reaction to what's actually happening. So lighten will react differently. They all kind of react in their own different ways. Screen does its own thing. Color dodge, linear add, these all do their own thing. You can use soft light and overlay if you want, but I often find that the top three here work the best. Now, this one's okay, so I'm going to keep it for now. I'm going to try chrome as well and do the same kind of thing. They put it at 50% just to see. Like when it's not as intense. I don't really like this one. This drop one, I have a feeling this is not going to work. Better than I thought, but it's got some weird artifacts in it. Here's just a random one that I had. You know, this is something you can use as a soft light, as a linear, you know, to try to add some drama, but we're not going to end up using that, I don't think. Oops. So note of that. This is a general one I sometimes use just as a soft light overlay. Just kind of gives it a nice surface quality. But in this one, I don't think we really need it. It's just different. We have our AO pass, which we didn't use before. So this is a great one. And this you normally put on multiply. You can put it on overlay as well, but normally you put it on multiply, and what that does is it just pushes back all the shadows. So I'm going to turn that way down because it was already getting kind of dark. I'm going to duplicate it, and then I am going to put it on overlay. Just very subtly turn that up. And what that's going to do is you're going to see it's just going to push her more to the front. I can also do that with this depth channel. depth channel is actually anything. It's basically a render from the front to the back. So anything in the front is going to be white, anything in the back is going to be black. And what that means is if I put that on multiply, it makes it really easy to do a sort of a coming out of the shadows sort of a look. Whereas if you put it like on the opposite and maybe put it on overlay, very similar, but it's more of a emerging into a spotlight kind of a look. So you can turn that way down as well. If you guys have any questions on anything I'm working on, please feel free to ask them. We're about halfway through the stream today. So yeah, through the first part of the stream, what we did is we ended up doing a quick pose. Posing our Samus character. And then rendering out some composite images, some images to composite for Photoshop out of Zbrush, and just kind of getting through the process of creating an illustration. Not much sculpting today, just kind of the whole process of how this illustration process works. All right, so at this point, I'm going to put all these up top just because they're going to overlay everything else. And we're going to take a look at some of these other things. I'm going to save it, put this mask up top. I don't actually know what this is. Oh, that's what I was drawing on. This is our color layer, which we likely don't need anymore. This is our clown layer, which we might need. This is our cavity mask, another cavity mask. Reflection, which I think is kind of working. Outline, we haven't played with. Metal, not in love with, but we'll try it. So let's see what outline does. Outline likely can be used for lighten, screen. And you see at its default value, it's incredibly intense. Sometimes you can have a very subtle, this is 12%, but you see, but it kind of gives a nice reflective quality to it. Something to play with. The thing to note about these types of matte caps, again, is that they don't actually respond to light. So there's no reflections here. It's not real. So something just to be aware of. All right. That's our cavity. Oh, sorry. Framer. These ones are interesting because they can actually be really cool for just general overlay and stuff like that. So like this is a nice way to, like, if I put this on soft light, it kind of creates an interesting, it's going to keep all the shadows and a lot of the information, but it does create an interesting illustration, right? It kind of like creates it's just a different look, really. I mean, this one versus this one. This one I think has this line already built in, which is kind of cool. And this one has a bit more of that going on. But if we change this to like soft light, we might get to see some different effects there. So you don't have to keep these at 100% either. It can be something that you just subtly dial in. So getting there. That one for me is a little intense with that. Struggling to kind of find where it's going to be really valuable, especially because it's kind of fighting the lighting a little bit, not too much though. And this one I like, but I kind of like what it's doing in the visor. I think I would have to paint some of that up. That's totally fine. And maybe I try them both. And one of them is very subtle. The only thing with using soft light on them is that soft light tends to give it a little bit of a palish complexion sometimes. So switching it to overlay might be more effective. Yeah. You see it's getting us like that nice highlight in the visor. It's getting some cool shadows going on here. And that's all stuff we can play up. So the last thing that we have here that I want to play with is we have these metal materials, our outline for the more reflection, actual reflection itself, and we have our cavity maps. It looks like we have a couple people in the chat today. Omar Oweda is here in our Twitch channel. Omar is an amazing character artist who I worked with at Cloud Imperium Games. I believe he's up in Seattle now working at Sucker Punch. He's also a Gnomon alum. Awesome character artist and super cool dude. So hello, Omar. Hope you're doing well, man. Let's see. And then we have our two cavity maps. So I'm going to zoom in on these so you can see what they look like. One of them does not have much information. One has a lot of information. The one with not much information, I'm just going to put on multiply. And that's pretty much straight away what I'm going to do. What that does, or seems to do right now, is nothing. So we might not need to use this at all. You can see kind of down in the abs here, it's doing a little bit of information, but we don't really need that. The next one I'm going to go to multiply again on the cavity here, and it's going to attempt to do some of the same stuff. But you can mostly see it up here. We are getting some weird artifacting, and I'm wondering what that's from, if it's from one of these or it's just from the previous renders. I think it's the previous renders. That's okay. We'll figure that out in a minute. Because I need to spend some time painting that out. Let's turn all this stuff on. Not that one. Not that one. You start to see we're getting close. It's not there. It's too reflective, but we're getting this cavity map is starting to dial some details in. Reflections are a little out of control, but we're getting there. And these framers are kind of adding a nice comic element to this, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and start keeping some of this. So what I want to do is actually use these clown passes now. So I want to select this visor, right? And I want to keep certain elements or delete certain elements, but I actually don't like what this metal element is doing to this, because I want to get this one for me. Oh, there's a lot that's good in here. Okay. Basically the short of what this does is my map is acting very strange. Okay. Metal to me is looking good on pretty much everything. It's just a little intense, so I'm just going to dial it down 5% more to 15%. That looks great. Outline is looking okay to me on pretty much everything, but it's just, again, a little intense, so I'm going to dial it down half of what it is, which is 6%. These shoulder pads, maybe it's a little intense on, but I kind of don't mind it. Reflection, this one's way too intense, so we're just going to start by dialing that down and seeing if it can even be salvaged. We already have some really nice highlights here, so it's not something like that I'm trying to, completely add to this, but there is some nice elements here, this type of stuff, this type of stuff that we do lose. But it's also not accurate to our lighting setup, so I'm kind of okay to just not have it. Yeah, we're not going to have it. What I was going to say about the clown pass, we're not actually likely going to end up using it that much, but let's say I really like, select in the clown pass, select the visor. Yeah, I really like this. We'll turn this way up. I like everything but this. We'll duplicate it just so it's easier. Get it after we do it. We could keep, I just kept the part that I wanted of the mask, basically. So if I really like that area, I can keep that area. It's cool. It's a nice way to make it work for us without having to do a bunch. And like right now, that does look kind of cool. So maybe if I keep, this on darker color or screen or even, color dodge, I can play around with this. You get that kind of emissive quality as I duplicate it again. I think that darker color had an interesting element to it. Ooh. Cycling through these. Cavity map and curvature maps, they're not necessarily the same. They do look very similar though. All right, so now I've kind of added like a little bit of extra highlight or a little extra something from that map that we got. And if there was other areas that we really liked, like I kind of like this, but I kind of like this, we could keep those if we want. This is one that, like, for example, like on the visor itself, I might select the clown pass, turn it off, and delete it, or just use the eraser. This is the wrong one. Select that here, go here, erase it, and you could delete that. And it works for you, depending on what you like. At this point, we kind of have the bulk of what we have for this illustration, and I'm pretty happy with how this is starting to look. But we have a lot of paint over we need to do, and we're pretty much on schedule. So we've got all the renders. The goal was to get the pose done in 30 minutes, the renders out in 30 minutes, a basic compositing done, which is where we are now. And so we have about 1 hour left in the stream, and we're going to paint. Now we're just going to basically paint, pulling my Wacom over so that it's a little not on the other side of my thing. And I'll show you guys a little bit more of that process of how I work in Photoshop, because I think I may have just somehow disconnected my tablet while pulling it over, which is great. As you do. Of course, I was using the tablet quite a bit. There it is. Okay. Put it on the right screen. There we go. Fill screen. Hide this. Now at this point, I'm going to save again. So we'll and also start another version. I like to work iteratively. I know that this is not something you necessarily need to do, but it is something I think is good. So now I can take all of these things, and even though they're here, sometimes for me it's more helpful to just remove them. Meaning, I know they're there in another file, but at this point, all I really need is to I'm selecting everything, I'm copying it, I'm pasting it. I don't need any of these layers below. I just don't. So I might take this depth mask and put it up here because maybe that's something I can use. But that's really it. So I'm just going to delete all these layers. I'm going to save again on my new version. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start painting. So I've got my mask here. I'm going to just Start trying to dial in what I think I want my background color to be. So I'm going to colorize this. Switch this to black, maybe. Maybe even go full. My brush is ready. So you can see those. They're over here. We'll have our layers over here. And at this point, I kind of like to have as few distractions as possible, right? So on my screen, I don't want a bunch of distractions. I just kind of want it to be very simple and straightforward. So saving, getting everything set up, and I'm going to try to figure out what I want that end product to look like. I'm going to mute for a sec so I can have a big drink of water and doesn't have to disrupt you. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start adding some atmosphere, and we're going to start painting on top of this thing. And there's a couple things I'm going to do real quick. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select this image, the background mask, and I'm going to hit Control U, which goes to Hue and Saturation. Basically what this does is I can colorize this, can crank up the intensity of this, and I can adjust the hue. So this is where I'm going to kind of get to choose what my background color is going to be. Now, I kind of like the idea of doing something red, to blend in with her. But I think something that might be nice is to do something that's a cooler color and do like a blue. At this point, since we're about 2 hours in, we have 1 hour left in the stream, by the way. If you guys have any questions about any of my process, anything I've been doing, what the end goal is, anything about Gnomon, just general entertainment things I've been watching, things I'm looking forward to, games I've been playing, ask me. I'm happy to chat about all kinds of things. I've been replaying Last of Us 1 because I have not played Last of Us 2, and so I'm getting into excited to get to play that. The only thing is that background arm might get lost if it's blue. What kind of games is everybody else playing right now? I'm gonna go blue anyways. Okay. GTA 5 again. Nice. Put this on top. At this point, I can also start layering things on top of this mask. Up until this point, I haven't done that at all, and I haven't really wanted to at all, right? But now that I'm gonna stop treating it as just compositing individual images, and I'm basically gonna treat it just as an illustration. So I can start overlaying a little types of different things. I'm going to take like this one. I'm going to use this brush that I really like, which I've downloaded or gotten from online, which is a smoke detail brush, which is somewhere in here. I just saw it right here. I'm going to scale this up quite a bit, and you'll see it has like this nice smoky quality. Something that it keeps dinging. Trying to figure out what it is. Sorry. There we go. So we'll choose like a black. It creates this nice smoke. So we're going to have the bottom of this and some smoke. That can be smoke or it can be fog, right? We could invert it and do the same kind of thing, which is totally cool as well. Kind of like the idea of it almost being like Ooh, maybe if we invert it. Let's try this. We did say we were going to have like this, she has this kind of warm up light. So maybe going to like a warmer color will fit a little better in general. And we'll say like, let's just try something different. So let's put this on there. So we have a mask. Let's try maybe like a really big color. And I want that to maybe be like a really bold orange. So I can kind of paint in that color. This might be an element for us later to add something to. So for example, what I'm saying like right now is I can come in here and I can say like I really like the upfill, which is a render that we specifically used. And I'm just trying to find the right image, sorry. I think it was called upfill, yes. So I come in here now, I can have my upfill, right? This is something that we can again use as a, just like we did before, overlays. We can use it all different types of things. Like, and we can maybe use it as a screen. Maybe we put a little bit of a saturation layer on it, which is only affecting it. It's colorized. Really saturate it. We can kind of get this nice, like, warm, like if she's standing in lava, that's kind of what I'm getting at, or she's next to lava. We could play around with this as being like a potential way to do that. And then I can take this, I'll rasterize this layer so I don't have to worry about it. But I can also take the levels of this layer and I can constrain them, crunch them. So if I only want, what I would do is I would probably, instead of doing that, I would do a levels actual adjustment layer and tie that in. And then I would take this, for now, we'll just make it really, really bright, really over intense. And then I'll go into the levels and I'll dial that in. So it's kind of just being like this middle sheen almost. But that way you can really see the light direction rather than it being just like a thing, right? Let's see, we got some questions already. That's great. Or people playing games, which is awesome. Oh yeah, the Steam Summer Sale. That's today. So I'm sure everybody's buying a ton of things that they won't play. Totally acceptable. Love it. Big fan of that. I have hundreds of games that I've bought on Humble Bundle and Steam Summer Sales that I've never played. No judgment there. Let's see, Destiny 2. Oh, the beta for Mortal Shell. Yeah, I really want to try that. That's a cool one. What would I recommend as the most opportunities for a modeler? Film, feature animation, or video games? I think there's opportunities across all three of those. I don't really see one of those as being like a thing that has more so than the others, to be honest with you. There's so many of all three of those that I think it's actually really difficult to answer. Kind of like this little orange light that we just added in. Somebody from Twitch, your name is bright blue, so it's hard to read it. You said you always have trouble in the first read or the silhouette of your art. What can you do to improve? Oh, and you've been playing Watch Dogs. That's a good question. I think the thing to think about is just always be thinking about silhouette. If you're having trouble looking at the first read, do just try to really focus on that as part of the thing, right? That you're only focusing on silhouette, and that's the key element of what you're trying to fix or something. It is hard to do though. So looks like I could also do something. Oh yeah, maybe we do like a blue light. See, so this is where we could get like a nice blue. I don't know. Chat, what do you guys think? Does blue, like a blue light? It's like kind of like maybe she's in front of a terminal or something. We can turn this off or this off too. Terminal or like a orange or no light. Blue, orange, or no light. Trying to look at the mini thing as well. I kind of like blue. Blue's cool, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense right now for this. Blue, orange. We've got two differing opinions here. We'll turn it off for now. I was doing something else. I was painting back some smoke. That's what I was doing. So we'll do like some smoke details. We'll do black. So I had a suggestion for a deep pink, which I think is something like that, which is kind of interesting. Maybe a little too colorful for my taste. Too many different types of colors at that point. Getting a lot more blues than I am oranges, though. But this is a nice way where you can bring in an existing element. Ooh, you know, an existing render that we had already done, and highlight the aspect of that render, which was the uplight of it. Give it some color, adjust the level so that it hones it in. Because again, like if it was just the normal layer, it would kind of look like this, right? But knowing that it's a directional light source, we can really dial it in to say where we want it to go. Like if we want it to be super comic-y, you know, then you know in Photoshop or in other things, you could do like a GIF of this. You could have it like some sort of thing is like animating, like it's a screen that she's in front of or whatever. You could do the same with like if it's lava or whatever, you do the same thing, that it's kind of like noise effects are obviously required for this, but you can play with all these settings as well. So I think I kind of agree with you guys, though. I think the blue's a nice pop. All right. Let's see. All right, so I was doing some smoke. So, classic concept stuff is to do like smoke in the background, right? So we'll put some white in the background, maybe, doesn't need, so now now that she's in front of blue, she's definitely not in lava. So we're gonna have to change this up. So we'll maybe make this background, we'll just fill this with a white right now. Zoom out just a little bit so I'm not working in just details. I often like to work in this size. We'll put like some sort of a in here. Brings up so much of the screen that it doesn't really affect us too much. What I can do now is colorize this layer again. I like to use this quite a bit, as you're probably noticing. Kind of feel like that's nice. It's almost like she's being enveloped in this smoke, so I'm actually going to duplicate that whole layer. I'm going to delete the mask entirely. So now it's in front of her. And now I'm going to erase. I'm going to switch my erase brush to the smoke detail brush, which is the same brush I just used. And we can kind of start to push some of this back. So I can either use erase, which is totally fine, or you can use a mask. I'm a big fan of masks. I use them all the time. But see here, what you'll see is I'm starting to kind of push this back a little bit. If I go too far, it's going to go too far. So I'm just kind of adding in a little bit here. I think this is that black smoke that was out at the bottom, which I actually still like quite a bit. And this almost blurring effect of like she's walking into something. I think I might grab all of these and put them on top. Yeah. We're getting a cool element where this is like overlaying on that, and I think that's kind of nice. This one, though, is creating a very strange shape because this is a screen. So we're getting some good stuff, but I think I actually need to create a new layer up top. Like a normal smoke brush. Maybe we just have more white. Let's get out of this doing black stuff. Let's do something with white. There's so much white here, and then this light kind of emerging through here. Let's just play that idea up. So let's get rid of this black. Even in here, I put a little black in. Let's paint over that with white, or just erase it. Paint it with the smoke detail brush a little more. A really big size so we can get some of those wisps. Something here that's got a lot of white though, which is this. Get rid of that. The screen layer is actually affecting it quite a bit. Sort of like smoke situation happening. So this has definitely changed the whole vibe of the piece, right? I think that's cool that it's kind of blasting up at her now. I might duplicate this whole layer and give it a multiply and turn this up. What this is going to do is, right now it's going to push everything into the back. I want to see what this could look like to make it feel more, we've got a lot of light back there. I think that's cool, but I'm wondering if it's possible to focus on her, because I think the white that I added in these layers is drawing away the focus from her. Maybe it should be more blue. So I'm going to try to capture this blue. Kind of painting on top of it. Some of that blue in this actual smoke. You can kind of see some of the wisps of that. Now the nice thing about all this is just, we can dial this back as much as we want. We can add as much as we want. We can have her completely in the smoke, not in any smoke, a little bit of smoke, right? This is that blue light. And at this point, if we still want to change it, we can still change it. And now it's like, oh, now I have the question again of, now we've got this blue, and everything's kind of this light and blue element. If we switch it to orange, oh, that's kind of nice too. I do like the blue more. All right, so now what we've got is essentially from here. What is this overlay layer? Do I need this? From here all the way down to here. I don't need that one. If I group all of this, turn this off and on, all this is effects. Right, so we painted in a bunch of effects. We painted a background effect, painted some smoke, we added a light blasting up on top, right? This is all cool stuff. But all that is just an effect. So what we can do now is we can spend a little bit of time, and I guess now it's also a good time to maybe open up the previous. This is like a good time for, because I've been working in this series. Now is a good time to open up the series and maybe see what this looks like. So while that's opening, I'm going to copy the whole thing. I'll copy it. Actually, this does fit really kind of nicely because it is in line, I think, with Metroid's colors, with Samus's colors. Sometimes they're like dark and moody and like lava and stuff like that, but I think adding something to the gamut of what my things that I have here is going to feel a little bit better. This is the 6 that we're working on, and most of these have been done in the stream. G88 was not, but this is the 6 that we're working on, and so this is where we are right now, and this is kind of how it'll fit into the lineup, which is, I'm pretty happy with how this the balance of all these is going to work, and the poses of how this is going to work, and I think that it's getting to a point where I'm feeling pretty good about it. So anyways, what I was saying is, at this point we've added all these effects, right? All these effects and all that stuff, but we haven't really gone into the actual painting process. We've just done compositing and effects. So let's save this because I like how that's going. Close it and we'll jump back in here. Now I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to start creating several layers actually. I'm actually going to turn this off. Well, I won't actually, I lied. I'm going to do one last thing. On top of this group, I'm going to create a curves layer. And I'm going to create a photo filter layer. This for me is kind of some finishing touches, but it's going to give us an idea of what the final vibe of this is going to look like, right? So if I turn my curve layer on, first there's a photo filter. These are easy. This is much like an Instagram filter, right? So we can turn it up, turn it down, and so on and so forth. You can go through all these. You can hit your arrow keys. Well, I usually put this to like 25 density. You can hit the arrow keys on this to kind of go through these and see if there's anything that you like, right? Like more than the original. Sometimes you'll find something you do like, sometimes you'll find something you don't like. Get it if you don't like it. Curves. This is a curves layer. What we do with the curves layer is we can basically create more specific shifts of tone or color. So right now we're using RGB, which is the entire thing, right? And what we're going to do is, like, if you'll see, like if I drag this up, it gets brighter. If I drag this down, it gets darker. But we can add points to the curve. So if we wanted the bright parts to get brighter and the dark parts to get darker, I'll back out so you guys can see just a little bit, we can. So if we want a more intense look to this, we can create something like this. That's, for me, a little too intense. So I'm going to actually tone a lot of this down quite a bit. And I kind of like getting a little bit more of the darks here. It's kind of nice. And a little bit more of the lights, but I definitely don't need what it was at before. So it kind of pushes that contrast, but in a way that we're able to really that we can really control. I'm going to put this over here so you guys can see it a little bigger and a little better. Right now, this is again non-destructive, so we can see what it looks like before and after with all these effects on top, and it is affecting the effects. If we don't want it to, we can go below it, and you'll see that actually changes the way that it works. But I do want it to do that. Now I can also go in and we'll just make a duplicate of it. So instead of doing it all in one, so this will say this is just contrast. This is colors. So now I can go into each individual channel and we can adjust the R, the G, and the B, the red, green, blue. So I can take the same thing and say, all right, if I want this to have more red, let's pump up the red. If I want to have less red, let's take down the red. So this is like the underwater sequence, right? But you can do the same thing. So you can, I like to typically create 2 points and push them opposites and see what happens. You can create some really interesting tonal, like this is an interesting piece to me. It's not necessarily what I want the final version to be, but you can create some cool things there. And sometimes it's not worth doing, right? To be frank, like sometimes it's like, oh, maybe a little bit more red. Maybe no. Maybe this is a little too contrasty for me right now. But so now we can go into green. Same thing. If you want those matrix-esque shadows, you want to put green in your shadows. This is part of where you're going to do it. You can control all that. So all your shadows have a lot of green in them, or maybe they have the opposite and they have, you know, less green in them. Right. It's also a place where you can create some sort of posterization if that's a look that you're looking for. So for me, let's see if we can get anything. Do I like the darks being green? Purplish is kind of nice. I don't like the highlights being green. I don't like the highlights. So for me right now, the only thing I would consider is maybe just bumping that down a little bit. But even then, I'm not 100% sure on that. So we'll remove those. And blues, big fan of blue. So let's see if we want the bottom to be blue. That's kind of a cool effect. If it's overall got this like bluish vibe, can do that. We can also take the highlights and make them a little more yellowish by removing that, or we can bump it here as well. So for me, the only thing I've liked so far is kind of doing this. And I can now close that and go from there, right? So what this does is it basically creates an overall image effect. So this is going to add contrast, and this is going to make it a little bit more blue. Now by itself, I don't like just the blue. I think it washes it out. But if I add this, we'll see, right? I can still play with the opacity of this. So if I like it, but I want to dial it down, I can do that. If I don't like this, I can dial this down as well. But one thing that this does do really well is if you're painting in colors, it does tie things together really, really well. It's a really good thing for that. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to keep working with these off because right now we're actually about to start painting. So like I was about to say before I got distracted and did the curves layers, I created a new layer down here, which is empty. I'm going to make 2 of these. One of these I'm going to tag as red. One of these I'm going to tag as purple or violet. Violet I'm going to set to overlay. Basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a painting layer, which is my red layer, and my purple layer is my overlay layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here on my red layer first. I'm going to zoom in quite a bit. And again, this is a big image. Like this is right now on your screen, it might look relatively crisp, but if you zoom in to what it actually is, there's a lot of artifacting here. There's a lot of issues in here that I kind of want to fix. Now I could go back to my previous renders and get this to not have this details on it. But we're going to see if we can get we're going to see if we can fix this before we do that first. So I'm going to zoom out. We're going to go over to our brush palette here, hold down this, and we're going to go to our mixer brush. Now our mixer, the ability to, as you'll see up here, have a point sample. Like you can point sample and then brush. Think of it meaning like if I click this, it's like finger painting. So I've selected that and now I'm dragging that green all over everything else, right? Which is kind of interesting. I'm going to select a different brush here. You'll see how it's still working. You can go up here and you can clear your brush, right? That's what some of these do. You can clean the brush and you'll start dragging. And what it starts doing is it starts working like a finger paint where you can drag and it creates from one area to another. Now we're going to undo all those. Why is that? Why do you care? Right. That's what you should be asking right now. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to clean this brush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in quite a bit. I'm selecting a brush, which is from One Pixel Brush, which is a concept art team. And I'm just going to kind of drag this area back and forth. I've alt-clicked here to create that as a source. And all I'm doing is I'm just going back and forth like this. And occasionally, just selecting and picking. Now, right now, there is a pretty harsh transition like right here, so I might try to fix that in a second. But there's all these little artifacts, and I'm going to go over the entire surface of this illustration like this. And for me, what I do at this point is I either clean this brush off and say, like, I think it's this one. I'm basically just going to create some texture on this that's not this little faceting that's been created by all this. I'm zooming out quite a bit. I don't mind the little texture it's actually creating, this little swirl pattern right now. If I want it to go in a specific direction, I can do that. Just going in this direction, maybe. You'll see it's going to affect the local colors, and that's exactly what I want. And you'll notice when I turn this off and on, the big difference is probably going to be that you're going to see there's a little bit of a shift in color. Maybe there's a little bit of shift in shading, and that's just because I wasn't really paying attention to what I was doing because I was talking. But I can create a sort of a natural surface quality just by going over the surface with this. It also, as you probably notice, it's rid of all of that faceting immediately. And it's going to, especially for illustration's sake, create a much more consistent look. You can use any brush with this. So let's say I want to turn this off and I'll make a new layer to try it again. I just want to use a airbrush, which is what this one is. Exactly the same. If you want a more aggressive brush, you can do that as well. And I think this is really good for this type of work. You don't source an image and you just start with a clean brush. What it's really, really excellent as is see all these little edges here. I'm going to zoom in really close for you guys. But this is a lot of little artifacts in it, right? So I'm just going to go along the edge here. Basically pushing this paint into a direction. And all those little artifacts are now gone. I'm actually using the stream preview as my window, as like a window that I'm using. Sometimes what I'll do is, see, this little line might be a little light. Just curious what that looks like. Not too bad. Might want a softer brush for that. Often what I'll do is I'll use my navigator. So if you go under Window, Navigator, what that does is it creates this window here, right? And so what I like to do with that is I like to have like, this is what my actual image looks like, but I don't want to get caught just at looking at the details. So I might just have this up on my other monitor all the time. And this makes it so that I'm always looking back and forth. It's over on my other side, but I'm always looking back and forth, and I'm always just kind of, balancing back and forth to see how it's looking. So I don't need that, but I have the stream preview because that's what I'm using today. And it's really, really effective at making sure that things are good for what you're doing. So if anything gets, strange, what I do is I come in here and I just paint it out. I either paint something out or I You know, if this feels like a weird highlight that feels like it's coming out of nowhere, I will use the mixer brush and I will just obliterate it. Maybe I'll use this more aggressive brush. There's pixelization and something. I can just run the mixer brush along it and it gets rid of that for me. There's a highlight that I want that I really like. I can try to bring that along and pull it. If something looks not precise, which we'll get into in a second, because there's a lot of this stuff up here, you see up here, that all needs to be worked on. There's this weird highlight that I believe one of the framers brought in, the framing matte caps brought in. So I'm going to just kind of paint this out just a little bit so it feels a little bit more natural. You could use a mask and a Gaussian blur, but it's not really doing the same thing because a Gaussian blur is just a blur. And what I'm actually doing is I'm actually pulling color information in a very specific direction. Not only that, like as you'll see right here, I'm actually able to shape it. So I'm able to take what I have here and like pull this in. Not necessarily that I'm blurring it. I don't want you to be confused as to think that I'm just blurring the object or the surface. It's actually me taking it and, like, for example, right here, I like this highlight. This is a cool highlight. Let's keep that. I want to pull that down. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to pull it all the way down into this surface here. You know, maybe I want to put a line in here, you know, something that does that. So that's kind of what it's used for. It's not just to blur the surface. That's definitely not what the intention of it is. You know, for some of this, yeah, you know, from these bigger surfaces, maybe you could do a Gaussian blur, but I don't think that's really what you would want to do. This is all on a new layer. All of this is on a new layer. We don't want to be destructive. We're trying to not work in a destructive workflow. Now, the reason I have all that other stuff turned off is because I'm working on a sample all layers right now. And so if I had all this other stuff on, which I think makes it look cooler, right? It will actually integrate that into this painting, and that's not what we want to do. Take this little brush and pull it along these edges to make them nice and crisp. I'll get a little closer so I'm more accurate with my brush strokes. Yeah, it's not just blurring, it's blending. A very targeted blur too, if you want to consider it a blur. So again, I kind of come through all here, being very gentle. I have nothing cleaned, nothing loaded on my brush there. That's where you can load up specific colors or textures. I'm just using a very large soft brush right now. Doing little circular motions. This is, like I said, this is where it kind of turns into it becoming more of an illustration, because at this point, I'm not thinking of this as 3D anymore. If I do think of it as 3D, I've found that it's harder for me. I'm trying to keep the model accurate, right? This is the mixer brush. This is the mixer brush. It's right under here. Mixer brush, very bottom. This is where you can load things on your brush. You can hold down Alt to select things for it. But what you do is you just start using a brush, and it kind of works like a smudge tool. And so I'm using that to more or less take all these little artifacts and get rid of them. Some of them I don't mind. You know, it's fine. I'm not trying to get 100% perfect on this. It's not right now. What you can see the difference is this is before, which is kind of wobbly. It's got some errors on it, right? And then this is the after, which is nice and clean. So we'll do this, or I'll do this, through the whole image. Doesn't take too long. It seems like it's very tedious, but to be honest, you know, you just, I was working on that other layer. You just kind of sit back and enjoy it. So a good time to fix, you know, like for example, here. This line, I want to go a little stronger. And I can also just go into my normal brush at this point and say like, all right, I want this line to be, and this is just where I treat it like painting. And the nice thing about the mixer brush is because it can be very aggressive. Like you know, we're using this gentle one right now for a lot of this. But because it can be aggressive, you can actually, more or less, you can paint with it. I'll try to get some of this faceting out of the way, so we're not focusing so much on that. But like, let's choose something like this. This area here, for example, you can use the mixer brush without having to color pick really at all. Pulling certain colors. It almost kind of feels like you're sculpting sometimes. So that little shape there that I just cleaned up looked like this before. So we'll do that. We'll just kind of go piece by piece. We'll get this visor done. Plane makes things take a little longer, but at the same point, you don't, if you're doing a very first image, right, you're having here is not wildly different. Like if I was going to get this approved, right, if I'm working somewhere and I'm like, hey, do you like this piece of concept art? I don't need to spend all my time, doing this right now. I could spend my time in other areas where I could say is, do you like this? And if they want it to be nice and refined and clean, um, you know, then I can spend the time on it. It's very similar to the smudge brush, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of my mixer brush process and this painting process. So more or less what I would be doing for the rest of this is exactly what you see here. And then at a certain point, I will start overlaying some textures. So we have about 15 minutes left. So once I get this little last bit on this helmet done, I'll quickly overlay some textures and kind of show you guys that as well. And well, before I do that, like even like I was saying, you can carve, you can sculpt down here. Like I can use the same techniques down here. This is a pretty messy area. So I know that there's like a little line here. I was attempting to do something. I'm trying to keep the colors of those planes independent. Just kind of work on this little section so you guys can see, kind of see how this would work. At least start blocking out, if I'm going to do any more painting on top of this, which I will, what that could look like. So that's the after. So that's the after, and this is the before. It's a pretty big difference. It's very easy to use. Which time would you get to do something like this in a studio? That really depends. Like, if it's do a concept, do multiple concepts. Typically, you have conversations with your directors or art directors of what they're expecting to see in concept art. So, on average, I would say that you're expected, especially if you're somebody who works in 3D, if they know that you work in 3D, part of the advantage of you working in 3D is that you can hand your models off to the production teams for future. Gives them a little bit of a head start, so they know that that's how you work. You might be expected to see 1 a day, 2 a day, 2 a week. It just depends on the project. But yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's kind of where that is, and I think I will spend time doing this on the whole project, on the whole piece. But fortunately, because of what we did already with all the other effects that we created, we'll get to a point where that is going to look pretty good pretty quickly, I think. But I do want to do just a quick thing of texture. So once somebody was asking about that, what I did is just Googling for grunge texture, right? There's all kinds of ways you can do this. There's plenty of things you can do. Grunge textures, there's tons of them. There's tons of free ones that you can find, tons of ones you can buy, royalty-free ones and not. I like ones that have a little bit of color in them. So something like this is kind of nice, right? I'm just going to copy the actual image here. I'm going to paste it. Here, we'll use just the helmet for now. Soft light. There's a lot of these weird dots in it, so maybe that's not a great one. But I'm going to take that and I'm going to dial this way, way, way down as a starting point. So the more that I see this image, I don't think I really like that one. Maybe like an orange peel. Tools, size, large. See what that could look like as a texture. So that might be able to give a little bit of a surface quality to this if we wanted to have a surface quality. We could also go back into what I was searching for. There's tons of these things. There's so many of these, like just trying to find one that feels like it works for you. Obviously, that's a fabric. A lot of these are previews. Turn these off. So this is kind of what it's actually looking like. So if you want to get a little bit of texture in there, I think something like this is a nice way to do it. Right? And then the other thing I was going to say, we didn't actually do this before, but now's a good time, is I did have all of those metal renders. So let's pull in a couple of them. Metal 1, 2, 3. And actually I want, oh yeah, and let's do like, I think it was the red one. So I'm gonna drag these in. Oh, they're going in the wrong spot. Zoomed in too far. Right, here's another element that we can do. So let's say we get a little bit of texture in here. We'll put the, I don't have any of the masks on here anymore, but if we had a mask, that's what we would do. Or just paint it out. Metal. We have this one. We have a red one, which I'll desaturate. Rasterize those. Desaturate. We have this one, this one, this one, and this one, right? I think for me, what I'm about to do, I think I will try to use this one or this one. Yeah, one of these two. I'm going to try them both, but here we go. So what you can do is you can get into a little bit of texturing here as well, where maybe you want to do some scratches. So what I'll do is I'll actually turn this on, I'll turn a mask on, and I'll invert the mask. And then I'll come into, and maybe you have these, there's all kinds of things you can have, right? But I'm going to paint in the mask white. And whenever I paint white, I should see, I'll turn this off. That's just a weird brush. Oh, I have the mixer brush on. Mixer brush is just in a mask, is still dragging. Still dragging whatever the color is. So on an all black mask, it's just painting more black. We'll get like some. This is the actual, underneath is metal, right? What that means is I can use, whether it's this one or this one, it doesn't really matter. I can use a brush that has some texture to it. And I can kind of come in here and say like, okay, maybe around here. Let's even maybe pump that up. Let's use something with some. He's using it as a. He's using it as a. For me, for some reason. What texture it is. So let's say we're going to do some little scratches, and they're coming like this. If you want to get into like that Boba Fett style thing, right? The underneath layer is already metal, so we'll say like this is already beaten up and like there's just a little bit of paint in the middle of this. You can start playing around with that. Obviously, this is just painting at that point, right? I can use scratch brushes and things to kind of create that. I can also use one of these textures. So like something like this could be nice. Okay, so let's maybe use this as a selection. I think I just painted the wrong color. Yeah. So this is all metal. Just pretend there's a panel that's all metal here. So you get a little texture in there by doing that. I'm just painting back and forth on the mask. Like if I wanted certain areas of it to be stronger, then all I do is I paint more of that in there. If I wanted to have that kind of, oh, you know, there are a couple areas of this that are still very, very strong. And that can kind of get you a nice little head start on this. And then, of course, with all the other stuff we have on there, really start to pop when you have a whole character that's kind of done like that. You know, it's that, and you can add the previous thing as well, which is like just a little bit of surface texture. And then, you know, kind of going through all that. I don't like those last little things I did, but that kind of thing can really add it. And it's really nice for, you know, big sections where you want to do dents and scratches and stuff like that. So just using a bunch of masks is probably my favorite way to explore that. This is something I will likely do at least a little bit on. I like some of what this texture is doing. What I would need to do, or what I would personally do, is probably take. I'll delete this mask because I don't want that. Delete, hide. I might take this and, you know, choose, first off, spend more than 10 seconds choosing a grunge texture, but then I might actually take this and you know, warp it to what I want it to be. So what direction do I actually want this to go? How is this going to sit on top of this thing? And then from here you can actually clone. So I'm hitting S and Alt to clone, and you know, start cloning over your whole character, and then you just paint the whole character relatively quickly. Or you start throwing in more grunge textures. And all I did to select that mask was go into channels and control click any of the channels, because that's just black and white. And that gives me a really easy mask to follow for that kind of painting. So it makes it nice and easy. That's how I would probably spend some time on that. But anyways, that is basically the end of our stream. And we have 2 minutes left, but I'm gonna close it here. This is what we got to today. To kind of recap, we had started in Zbrush rendering out posing, and then rendering out a bunch of images to composite in Photoshop. We did composite all of them, and kind of laid them on top of each other, saw what worked, what didn't work, adjusted our lighting, played around with some smoke effects, you know, some of these types of effects here, lighting effects, rendering effects, and get to the point where we are pretty much at the finishing stage, which I'll likely do off stream. But yeah, that's where we're at. So I appreciate everybody joining me today on Gnomon Art Jam. Thank you guys so much for joining. It's always nice to have you guys here and have people to bounce ideas off of, bounce questions off of. So really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you guys very much. And again, we will be doing another Art Jam next week from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So please feel free to Pacific time. So please feel free to join and hang out again, whether that's on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook. We stream on all three of those. So for whatever is the most comfortable for you. But thanks again. Look forward to seeing you.